Hi guys, welcome back. This week on ShakeTube 2017 we are discussing Richard II. I have here the Pelican Shakespeare edition. Rather like this one, it has a lot of notes in the beginning. I've never encountered this play before, this is my first time reading it. I've never seen it or anything like that. But I really enjoyed it. I seem to like the histories quite a bit and also the tragedies. Comedies are a little bit lower on my like list of the plays, but I definitely enjoyed this one quite a bit. It starts out as sort of a conflict between two men. We have the Duke of Hereford, which is Henry Bolingbroke, and then we have the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Mowbray. Well, Bolingbroke accuses Mowbray of being a traitor and also being complicit in the death of the Duke of Gloucester, and Mowbray, of course, denies these charges. And it's getting quite heated. It ends up becoming being presented before Richard II to kind of be the judge of what's going on, and he tries to calm them down and get them to just accept apologies from each other. But according to Mowbray, he says, "My life thou shalt command, but not my shame. I am disgraced, impeached, and baffled here, pierced to the soul with slander's venom spear." So he insists on a duel against Bolingbroke, and the king agrees to let it go forward up until the very last minute when he calls a halt to it and decides that he's going to kind of decide their fate, and he's going to banish them. Now he kind of seems a bit more one-sided with it, you might say. He banishes Bolingbroke to 10 years, but he gives a much harder sentence to Norfolk. He says, "Norfolk, for thee remains a heavier doom, which I will some unwillingness pronounce. The sly, slow hours shall not determine it. The dateless limit of thy dear exile, the hopeless word of never to return, breathe I against thee upon pain of life." And so he's never allowed to return to English soil. And Mowbray's response is, "The language I have learnt these 40 years, my native English now I must forgo, and now my tongue's use is to me no more. What is thy sentence, then, but speechless death, which robs my tongue from breathing native breath? Then thus I turn from my country's light to dwell in solemn shades of endless night." So he's sent away to other countries where he doesn't know the language, and that's pretty much the last we will see of him, although he is mentioned again later on. So now this conflict switches, you might say, roles. It's going to be Bolingbroke will still be involved. We have his father, the Duke of Lancaster, John Gaunt, and he sort of pleads to the king, tries to get him to reduce the sentence and everything. At first, right after he initially makes the sentence, he sees the sadness in Gaunt's eyes and takes pity upon him, and it's his uncle actually, takes pity upon him and reduces the sentence by 4 years, so he's only banished for 6. But then later on, it's hard to determine the time frame that takes place in this, but Gaunt appeals to the king once again. He's very sick, he wishes to see his son before he dies, and he's hoping he will commute the sentence of banishment, but the king is adamant and he will not change his mind. And sadly, Gaunt dies before he gets to see his son again. But then the king does something really heinous. He takes all of Bolingbroke's inheritance from his father. He takes all of his money, his lands, and everything for the crown. And this is where you get the conflict between King Richard II and Bolingbroke, who's now going to raise up an army to kind of go against Richard II. Many people tried to dissuade the king from doing this, including the Duke of York. He says, "Seek you to seize and gripe into your hands the royalties and rights of banished Hereford? Is not Gaunt dead, and doth not Hereford live?" He says, "You pluck 1,000 daggers on your head. You lose 1,000 well-disposed hearts," meaning he's going to turn the people against him. Now there's a time later on in the play where the king leaves for quite some time, and because of events that happen, many people believe him dead, and his followers, and in fact most of the Welshmen, kind of turn away from him towards Bolingbroke, who they see building power. And so when Richard II returns and he hears about Bolingbroke building up an army against him, he thinks he still has his supporters around him, but he does not. The Welshmen, hearing thou art dead, are gone to Bolingbroke, dispersed and fled. And he still thinks he may have some of his other supporters. I think it was Bushy and Green were some servants of the king, but they are also dead. So he really does not have the support to kind of protect the crown for himself. And this is where we have this passage that I really like from the king, where he kind of sees his inevitable defeat to Bolingbroke. For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings, how some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court, and there the antic sits, scoffing his state and grinning at his pomp, allowing him a breath, a little scene, to monarchize, be feared, and kill with looks, infusing him with the self and vain conceit, as if this flesh which walls about our life were brass impregnable, and humoured thus comes at last, and with a little pin bores through the castle wall, and farewell king. So, like I said, he sees his sort of inevitable demise as the king, and eventually comes to the conclusion that he will not be able to retain the crown, and agrees to forfeit it to Bolingbroke. And this is where this interesting cover design that I was curious about, it's taken literally from a passage right here. It says, Richard speaking here, he says, "Here, cousin, seize the crown." He's talking to Bolingbroke. "On this side my hand, and on that side thine." That's where the two hands here. "Now is this golden crown like a deep well that owes two buckets, filling one another, the emptier one ever dancing in the air, the other down, unseen and full of water. That bucket down and full of tears am I, drinking with griefs, whilst you mount up on high." So he's, attaining the crown while he's, down in the depths of despair. And I thought that was really an interesting cover design, an interesting way to choose from that passage. So I won't go into the end of the inevitable demise of Richard II. As Bolingbroke takes the crown, he becomes Henry IV, and I believe there are two plays, a two-part play that Shakespeare writes on that continuance. So I would like to pick that up at some time, but we're not reading that for ShakeTube 2017. Another interesting little passage that I liked, and I think it's probably like one of the more well-known passages, is actually printed out on the back, is just a statement from Gaunt where he's talking about the throne and England itself, and he has this one wonderful little quote: "This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England." I think I remember hearing that in an actual Sherlock Holmes episode with Basil Rathbone. I remember him stating that little passage right there. Now I know where it's from. But I really enjoyed this play overall. Like I said, I want to pick up Henry IV, the two-parter, at some point, hopefully. But the next one we're moving on to is Henry V. So we're skipping a little bit, but I definitely enjoyed this one a lot, and I'm looking forward to, like I said, reading more. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye-bye.